Recently, I made a video on some features that you should avoid when shopping around for a new laptop, and I wanted to make another video discussing some absolutely must-have features that you need to look out for when buying a new laptop, especially in 2021. So I've come up with 10, or not 5, but 10 of the most important things that I need in any laptop that I'm using. Basically, I'm hoping that you can use this video as a guide when you're browsing around. Now, before getting into this, I just want to bring up the fact that there's no such thing as a perfect laptop. So it's completely okay if you can't find every one of these features that I'm about to mention in this video in one device. There's always going to be compromises, especially when it comes to your budget, but hopefully these will give you an idea of what to look for. All right, so the first feature I want to discuss is looking at the best possible display, because it's the most important component of a laptop. So there are 4 factors that I think you should look out for: the screen resolution, color gamut, brightness levels, and refresh rate. Let's start with resolution. I think 1080p is a good baseline to start with, but we've been seeing a sudden or subtle shift towards 16:10 aspect ratio displays that offer more vertical screen real estate. In that case, a 1200p or 1440p or even 1600p for bigger laptops is a good pick. If you're a professional photographer or content creator, upgrading to a 4K panel would be beneficial provided you stick to a 16-inch screen or larger, but for most buyers, 4K is pretty much pointless on such a small screen. The next important factor is the color gamut of these displays. Now, for those of you wondering what color gamut is, it's essentially a range of colors that's visible to the human eye. So the wider the color gamut percentages, the better the color reproduction. Now, there are 3 different measurements on most laptops. There's sRGB, which is the most used, and then there's Adobe RGB and DCI-P3, which is typically wider gamuts with higher color accuracy. I strongly recommend you pick a display that covers at least, and I mean at least 100% sRGB and the highest numbers possible if your manufacturer lists the Adobe or P3 numbers. You can actually check that by navigating to the specifications tab of a specific laptop's webpage and take it from there. The next factor is brightness levels. Now, that's usually measured in nits, so the higher the screen backlight's output, the better the experience is going to be in brighter environments. Of course, the panel being matte or glossy factors into this as well, because you can have a super bright backlit display, but the experience might be terrible if the screen reflects ambient light right back into your face as if you're looking at an actual mirror. Now, most laptops offer 300 to 350 nits or higher. That's a good option to go with. There are a few laptops that I've come across that can push over 500 nits, but those panels tend to cost a lot more, and they're actually quite hard to get hands on right now, especially with a lot of laptop manufacturers because of supply and demand. Personally, I wouldn't settle for anything less than 300 nits and a matte screen option as well, but just be aware that these screens aren't typically available for touch-enabled devices. Finally, there's refresh rate, which is measured in hertz, and that represents how many times a display can refresh an image per second. So the higher the number, the smoother the experience. Now, this is more gamer focused because displays that offer 120, 165, or even 240 hertz can result in smoother gaming experience. Anything about 240 hertz, I mean, to me, that's just pointless, and I think you shouldn't fall for that trap. I should also mention that generally, as refresh rate increases, brightness levels take a bit of a hit as well. So you want to make sure that you find the right balance between both those factors. On the other hand, 1080p 60 Hz panels are perfectly fine for productivity. Now, for 15 inches or larger gaming laptops, I think the sweet spot is 1440p or 1600p or Quad HD operating at 120 Hz or 165 Hz. Next up, I wanted to talk about extended warranties for your laptop. Now, this can be a touchy subject just because it really depends, or the experience itself really depends from one brand to another. Usually, out of the box, every laptop or every new laptop comes with 1 or 2 years of coverage. But I would encourage you to look into extending that if you're afraid that something might go wrong later in the future, or if you don't trust yourself with your laptop. Some brands include or offer accidental incidents for an extra $40 to $70. I think Lenovo is the cheapest option that I've seen so far, and they have been pretty good, at least with Mike, since I do remember he broke his ThinkPad, and the customer support with that was great because he bought the extended warranty for that laptop. Now, technically, you can replace the components yourself, but you have to realize that not everyone is comfortable with that. All right, so item number 3 revolves around getting the right amount of memory. and of course, upgradability. I mean, having easy access to components is a nice thing, and this also depends on the type of laptop that you're shopping for. For instance, thin and light devices are impossible to upgrade these days. On the other hand, a lot of gaming laptops can be upgraded, but not everyone is comfortable opening their expensive investment. The main problem is a lot of companies try to sell their base models with 8 GB of RAM, and for light uses, it just isn't enough. I mean, everyone that I know has tons of browsers open and multiple apps running in the background, and on a Windows PC, it'll easily eat through 8 GB in no time. So try to maximize on your memory right away while keeping in your budget, but I think 16 GB should be a bare minimum. The storage can be upgraded later on since most laptops do come with replaceable M.2 drives. In fact, I created a guide on how to do that, so if you're interested in checking that out or figuring out how to do it, I'll leave a link right over here. This next feature is the most important in my opinion, and that has to do with finding the right battery size for your laptop. Look, one of the advantages of buying a laptop in the first place is to make your computing experience seamless while being unplugged. If you're a student, you want to make sure that you have a laptop that lasts all day. The same goes for professionals as well. So for thin and light devices, 55 to 70 watt hours is a good range in terms of size, and that'll last you anywhere between 12 to 14 hours with light usage. But some devices like the ZenBook 13 that I reviewed can last almost 17 hours. Now, switching over to the gaming side, which are slightly bigger, I'd say anywhere between 76 to 90 watt hours is a good range. So that'll last you anywhere between 8 to 13 hours, depending on the CPU and GPU configuration that you opt for. But you also need to know your needs in this case. If you don't think your gaming laptop is going to be unplugged for the most amount of time, you might not need to spend that extra money for a bigger battery. As a rule of thumb, avoid laptops with big screens and small batteries. It's a common way manufacturers save a few bucks. The fifth feature I always look for is a laptop with plenty of ports, and to make sure that they operate at good speeds. With thin and light devices, it can get a little tricky since manufacturers compromise on the number of ports to reach a slim profile. I mean, a good example is the XPS 13. You'll need to carry around a packet of dongles for this thing, and in most cases, nobody wants that. As for speeds, it's important to understand USB branding. On laptops, there's typically a selection of USB 3.2 Gen 1 5 gigabits per second and Gen 2 10 gigabits per second ports. But some laptops compromise things and only give you Gen 1 ports, and in some cases, I've seen some really slow USB 2.0 ports thrown in as well. Just make sure that you have or get a laptop with at least one USB 3.2 Gen 2 port, since it's super useful when you're plugging in an external drive or other high bandwidth devices. I also want to mention having a full-size HDMI port is a must-have on laptops, just because most people have access to a monitor or TV that supports HDMI, and this will allow them to simply plug in their laptop to a bigger screen when even doing simple things like watching a movie or talking to friends and family. Trust me, I've been in that situation, and it's certainly something that you'll love having. The sixth feature might not be applicable to everyone out there, but for content creators, this is key. Now, if you find a laptop with a full-size SD card slot, make sure that it's a fast one, like UHS 2 or higher, since it supports faster memory cards, which will allow you to transfer footage or raw photos from your camera to a PC much quicker than slower UHS 1 readers. Now, moving on to feature 7. I always look for a glass trackpad on a laptop. Now, unlike plastic, glass tends to be a lot smoother, more accurate, and yes, it's also easier to clean as well. Now, it used to be available on higher-end laptops, but budget-friendly ones have brought that into the trend as well. It is an experience and one that you'll learn to appreciate over time. My next must-have feature on a laptop is having a good quality webcam and a good quality or good sounding microphone as well. But good luck finding one these days, because most of them are pretty trash, and in some cases or in some laptops you can actually hear the fans running in the background. Also, please avoid nose cams or the ones that are placed at the bottom bezel. Gigabyte, I'm looking at you. A few good ones that I've come across include the Flow X13. The stuff from Lenovo Legion is good. I would also include the MacBook Air M1. Some bad examples are the Razer Blade laptops, the XPS series from Dell. They're all pretty trash. HP's Omen laptops are great, but the quality of the webcam is not that great. The microphone sounds pretty average as well. The next feature is to pick the right keyboard to get work done faster. and efficiently, of course. But also remember that every keyboard takes some time getting used to. And yes, I understand that you'll probably need to try out a few one, but trust me, this is actually it's a really big one. Now, a few factors to consider are feedback, spacing, and backlighting. Ideally, keys with longer travel distances tend to provide satisfying actuations with a little bit of force involved. Now, there are a few examples out there that exhibit a mushy feeling when you bottom out, and that completely takes away from the fun while typing and gaming. Also, look out for keys that are spaced closer to each other because it improves the typing accuracy. Now, a good example of this is the XPS series, the XPS 13, the 15, and the 17. The keys are larger and they're closer to each other, and I still think it's one of the best keyboards that you can find out there, which is why I'm still using one. But I think a bad example is something like the Acer Triton 300 SC that I checked out a while back. Now, the feedback was awesome on the laptop, but for some reason, the keys were just so small and the spacing was a lot wider than normally you'd expect with other laptops, so I constantly found myself making a lot of typos. And of course, every keyboard needs to be backlit. That should be a must-have feature in 2021. As for layouts, there are two options that are common. One's the standard size that's centered around the palm rest area, and the other one is a full-size solution that includes a numpad. Now, this is usually a good option if you work with a lot of numbers, but it also offsets the typing position. Sometimes your palms might be hanging right off the laptop's edge, so those are some things to consider as well. Personally, I think Legion and some Zephyrus laptops have it nailed on the gaming side, whereas Lenovo and Dell have that sort of stuff nailed with their thin and light laptops. The last feature that I wanted to discuss is picking the right CPU for your needs. For instance, if you're looking for a thin and light laptop, you might think that you need the fastest CPU in that portable package, which will give you great performance, and you're just going to have the best power for the years ahead. But in reality, I think it might be a little overkill, especially if you value longer battery life. I would suggest you look into an i5 and Ryzen 5, and not necessarily an i7 or Ryzen 7 options. I've actually made a video comparing Intel's latest Core i5 and Core i7 CPUs, and the results are actually really eye-opening. Not only you get better battery life, but in some cases, the i5 CPU outperforms the i7 by maintaining higher clock speeds. Now keep note that this is specifically for thin and light devices. Now, if you switch over to the gaming side, stepping up the core count will yield you better multi-core performance, and some games really love that. So that pretty much concludes my top 10 must-have features that you need to look out for when shopping around for a new laptop. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I have yet to find a laptop that can achieve all those features that I just mentioned. And you might run into the same situation as well. Maybe you might be able to hit 7 of these points based on your budget. So use this video as a guide when you're about to spend your hard-earned money. Anyways, that pretty much wraps us up, guys. Thanks again for watching. Stay safe and spend responsibly. That's the most appropriate term that summarizes this video. So I'm pretty proud of that.